Hi everyone, my name is Aisha Jawed. I am a consultant at the Graduate Writing Center here at Teachers College. Welcome to this online session on an introductory overview on how to synthesize and condense pertinent literature into a well-developed and organized literature review. Before we begin, I want each of you to take a moment and write down how you feel about conducting a literature review. Have you ever written one before? If yes, what was that experience like for you? Also write down, what are your fears about writing a literature review? In today's session, we are going to provide an overview and purpose of a literature review, understand the process involved with reviewing pertinent literature, and learn the style of writing a literature review. There are multiple purposes of a literature review. Some that are beautifully described are quoted here. A literature review provides a clear and balanced picture of current leading concepts, theories, and data relevant to your topic or subject of study. It represents the sum of the current knowledge on a topic, as well as your ability to think critically about it. And it is an interactive process that involves listening to what is being said and then formulating a comment designed to advance the dialogue. There are two kinds of literature reviews. The first kind involves freestanding ones that are assigned as part of a course and published in research journals. The second kind is part of a research study that could be included as an introduction to a published empirical study or as a chapter found in a dissertation. So peer-reviewed journal articles are primary sources of information to include in a literature review and generally are the template for published empirical studies. They are the recommended and preferred sources to obtain information from when writing a research paper and form an integral part of providing background information about a problem in a published research study. Secondary sources can include editorials, magazine and newspaper articles, as well as media reports. They are not usually as credible as primary sources and only should be integrated in literature reviews if you are unable to obtain pertinent and relevant information about your topic or subject, population of interest, scope and magnitude of the problem, etc., from primary sources first. So here's another quote that globally represents the function and purpose of a literature review. A review of the literature enables you to acquire a full understanding of your topic, what has been already said about it, how ideas related to your topic have been researched, applied, and developed, the key issues surrounding your topic, and the main criticisms that have been made regarding work on your topic. So a couple more purposes of a literature review. It offers findings from past empirical studies to support evidence-based practice, emerging research, and future directions in the field. It provides information on limitations, gaps, and scarcity of information on the problem for future research and practice endeavors. And it helps shape and inform the foundation for the topic or problem you want to address. So overall, a systematic review of the literature will offer up-to-date information and recommendations to expand knowledge and awareness on a problem, assess what has and has not worked to address the problem, and inform future directions for research and practice endeavors on approaching the problem. The first step in conducting a literature review is to begin by finding recent articles, generally spanning the past 5 to 10 years, covering an overview and background of your topic or problem, the incidence and prevalence of it, as well as the scope and magnitude of it, populations at risk, and also risk and protective factors. Globally speaking, having a better understanding of the overview and background of the problem can help you develop your research questions and hypotheses to more comprehensively address your topic or problem. So when exploring literature on your topic, you will likely find studies that fall into quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method research designs. Examples of quantitative research designs are randomized control trials, case control studies, retrospective and prospective ones, as well as cross-sectional and longitudinal ones. Examples of qualitative studies could be a meta-analysis or ethnography. And mixed method research designs incorporate both quantitative and qualitative methods. So when you begin the process of conducting a literature review, it is important to assess the credibility of the methods that are employed in the research studies by learning more about the methodology present and inherent in each research study. Pertinent aspects of methodology that you can explore are the target population, which comprises the sample size, geographic location, and other demographic and illness characteristics of this population, properties of measures and scales that could be either objective or subjective in nature, whether it's a self-report, a questionnaire, an interview, or if it's measuring something more factual, like a clinical measure. Looking at the constructs of the scales to see if they represent any specific concepts, as well as assessing psychometric properties of measures and scales that could include sensitivity and specificity, as well as validity and reliability of each measure or scale. It is also recommended to review whether there was any theoretical or conceptual framework that helped design the research model presented in the study. And it's also valuable to see how missing data and non-response were handled by the investigators in the study. The next step is to read about the data analyses that were involved in each research study. For quantitative data analyses, describe any statistical packages that were used to analyze the data. Examples could be STATA or SPSS or SAS, or could be other ones as well. Identify whether parametric or non-parametric data analyses were used. And discuss whether there were any correlations or associations identified between or among the variables. For quantitative data analyses, identify whether any qualitative software was used to analyze the data, whether it could be Atlas or NVivo or OpenCode or others as well. Then, describe any patterns, themes, and associations identified when coding or grouping concepts from transcripts of interviews, focus groups, and audio or video recordings, as well as from field notes during observations to help explain and conceptualize the data. For both quantitative and qualitative research studies, discuss results and conclusions drawn from each research study. Describe whether there were any strengths and weaknesses or limitations in each study. And also identify whether conclusions have provided recommendations for future directions in research and practice. The next step in this process is to analyze the literature by organizing the literature into themes and key points as the basis to write your research questions. Then, after you have written your research questions, assess which past empirical studies contribute to answering each question. Also take some notes on how future research could expand potentially on these studies to better understand your research questions, and also to define more clearly your research questions. Now that you are ready and prepared to begin writing your literature review, synthesize the background of the problem, study design, methodology, the different kinds of data analyses, results and conclusions drawn, and strengths and weaknesses or limitations of past studies into themes or categories, so grouping them. After you have condensed the literature through the synthesis process, present the pertinent information that reflects your research questions and hypotheses in a summary that could range from 1 to several paragraphs. Okay, let's take a moment to talk about verb tenses when writing your literature review. Specific verb tenses are designated to be used when describing results and conclusions from empirical studies, as well as when discussing one or more past studies as a reference point to explain the background of a problem. So generally, you can use past tense or present perfect tense, such as explained or has explained, when introducing source material. And usually, present tense is used for results to explain the results of an experiment. For example, the results show, or knowledge that has been clearly established, such as researchers agree, showing some kind of confirmation. Okay, so now that we are going to apply everything that we have learned about our literature review, I am going to present an example of a paragraph from a literature review from one of my past graduate research papers, and we are going to identify and discuss how themes that are present in these published empirical studies have been presented. So several studies have acknowledged the prevalence of non-adherence in adolescents with chronic health conditions and have identified treatment perceptions, including medication beliefs, that affect adolescent behavior. So this first sentence is an opening global sentence which basically describes that there is a common finding across studies about non-adherence in the target population of adolescents with chronic health conditions. And it specifically has identified that one of the root causes of this problem could be the medication beliefs that adolescents have. These studies have identified the following beliefs that may affect adherence patterns: adolescent perceptions of severity of medical condition, necessity of medication and treatment efficacy, perceived immediate and chronic side effects, and treatment risk to benefit ratio. So this specific sentence groups the beliefs into specific themes and cites the studies. Numerous studies have found that medication beliefs account for variation in medication adherence beyond demographic and illness characteristics among adolescents with chronic health conditions. These studies confirm that negative beliefs about medications are associated with poor adherence and subsequent poor health outcomes. So these last two sentences basically describe the clinical implications of the themes, of the groupings of the themes identified in the second sentence. And they further expand on the importance of these themes to get a better background of the overall problem with non-adherence among adolescents who have chronic health conditions. And this paragraph concludes with a global summary statement about the findings that are consistent across several studies in the literature, in the current existing literature, that describe the problem as the basis to form potential research questions and hypotheses later on in this graduate research paper. Thank you for joining us today in this online session on literature reviews. I wish you the best of luck with writing papers this semester, especially research ones. And as always, the Graduate Writing Center is a resource available to you to help support you in your writing endeavors this semester.